We're joined by Dr. Ewan Graham, a Shangri-La Dialogue Senior Fellow for Indo-Pacific Defence and Strategy at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Graham, first of all, tell us how diplomatically significant is this deal for the Philippines and the U.S., and also how it plays into a wider strategy for the Philippines going forward.
Well, it is very significant. It's the first expansion of access for the US in defense terms in Southeast Asia for several years. This agreement dates back to 2014, and it didn't move very far under the Duterte presidency. So I think there's relief on the US side, not just that it's being implemented now, but it's also been expanded with the addition of 4 new defense access sites in the Philippines.
And for the Philippines, this relationship with the U.S. is significant, but it's also a so-called jumping-off point to other diplomatic relations moving forward, correct?
Yes, indeed. The Philippines only has one treaty ally, that's the United States, and that treaty was reaffirmed in Secretary Lloyd Austin's meetings with his counterpart in the Philippines today. But this isn't occurring in isolation. The president of the Philippines will travel to Japan next week, and he's expected to discuss there a proposed bilateral defense agreement between the Philippines and Japan. So the message that's being sent, I think, to China in particular by this is that this is not just a bilateral one-off, but this is a thickening of the linkages between the alliances themselves.
It's interesting, but let's have a deeper look, though, at the agreement on the table today. What does that mean on the ground? What will it now allow Washington to do in the Philippines that perhaps it couldn't do before?
Well, until now, the US has relied on access through Singapore and Japan, and with nothing guaranteed in between. This now brings a presence in the South China Sea, and it's close to Taiwan. So those are 2 strategic flashpoints that are very much in the headlines. And as a result of that, it gives the US options to bring in its defense forces into those strategically significant areas. We don't know exactly what the 4 new sites are, but I think we have a hint of that with the plans for defense exercises later this year to have a built-up presence in the north of Luzon. And that, of course, is close not just to the West Philippine Sea, as Manila calls it, but also to Taiwan. So if you draw out some concentric circles from there, you see the obvious strategic gain for the United States. To put it simply, the Philippines is very important strategic real estate.
Yeah, absolutely, closing out the loop there. Now, what about something else that was also mentioned in the joint statements, the $82 million that the U.S. has pledged for infrastructure investments for the existing 5 sites under ECTA? That's a lot of money. What's that going into?
Well, we're starting from a low base, so bricks and mortar, the extension of runways, logistics facilities that may allow the US to have pre-deployed equipment on site that will make it easier for its aircraft and ships to operate. One thing that I think observers are looking very carefully at is whether Subic Bay, the former US base, is included as part of these new access arrangements, because that's a very strategic site. And the US Navy will be, I think, very keen to maximize its potential if that's included. But this isn't just a one-sided agreement. The $82 million is a down payment from the United States, from which the Philippines will also benefit because it operates from those locations. They remain sovereign Philippine bases. So this isn't a reversion to the Cold War arrangement. This is hopefully a framework from which both parties mutually benefit.
Earlier, you mentioned China and how it's perhaps receiving this message from the Philippines and the U.S., which also then begs the question of how can the Philippines balance its relationship with China going forward? A key economic partner, mind you.
Yes, very much so. And I think that the current administration in the Philippines is mindful of that. President Marcos went to Beijing quite recently and came back with a number of economic pledges, and that's part of the balancing strategy that Manila is playing. It doesn't want to give up on the China relationship. But I think people are maybe a bit surprised by President Marcos that he has a firm geopolitical view, including an attachment to the United States alliance as the best way of securing the Philippines against potential threats, because it has limited capability of its own. So I think this is not a departure from China relations for the Philippines. They will want to continue that economic relationship and make it as strong as they can. But what this does represent is a doubling down on the alliance.
Did it also strike you as significant, the timing of Lloyd Austin's visit paralleling with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg's visit to South Korea and Japan?
I don't know if that was coordinated. Lloyd Austin will travel out several times to Asia in any given year. And I think this was a long-standing schedule and agreement. So I don't think it's necessarily an arrangement to coordinate with NATO, but it does show, I think, the presence of the NATO former Secretary General, that there is global interest in Asia, and that there is a linkage that's drawn broadly defined between events in Ukraine and events in Asia.
Indeed. We appreciate you coming on and speaking with us, Dr. Ewan Graham, a Shangri-La Dialogue Senior Fellow for Indo-Pacific Defense and Strategy at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you.